Huh. Okay, let's see, folks. All right. All right, folks, here we go. Hey, everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about Michigan State's 77-74 loss to the Wisconsin Badgers in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament. Before we begin, a quick shout out to Michael Bosnick, who's a Mateen Cleave supporter. He ran into me before the game on the way in. Thanks for your support. If you want to join Michael and the other great supporters of the show, head on over to our support page at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. There you can find the necessary links. Okay, Rod. So this game started well for MSU, and then a little bit of foul trouble, and Wisconsin just made a few more plays to take a 4-point lead going into the halftime. And then, just like in the previous meeting in East Lansing, again, Spartans, caught them in the second half, just like before, passed them. But unlike the first matchup, this time they just could not contain John Tonje. Star Badger seemingly scored at will in the second half from the line, from the field. He definitely drove and got fouled a lot going into the basket. Although even despite this, Michigan State still had an opportunity to win. They were down five. Jackson Cole hits that big three to cut it to two. A couple free throws go back and forth. It was a close game. Down to 3 points. Holloman had a really nice wide open three, or seemingly wide open, and then Gilmore blocked it. Just jumped out of coming out of nowhere. Blocked the 3-point attempt. Tanji's fouled. Game looks like it's over. Tonje misses both his free throws, his only misses of the day. And then Fears dribbles down the court with just a few seconds, takes a 50-foot shot, and is blocked by Tonje, who somehow, for some reason, decided to try and block that shot at half court. So anyway, so Michigan will now face Wisconsin since Michigan had a buzzer beater to beat Maryland and take them out. As we're walking back from the game, my family's like, this is one of the kind of most disappointing sort of days in the Big Ten tournament we've had as family, outside of the worst, of course, which was 2020, where the tournament was canceled as we're pulling into town in the 2 weeks to stop the spread. But this is definitely up there as far as just kind of like a disappointing day, a day where we thought there was a little bit more we expected. So anyway, so I guess we'll get your thoughts. I mean, imagine a lot of people are probably talking about that shot at the end, which is two kind of actually sort of back to back, kind of risky plays by Wisconsin that worked out for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a glass half empty, glass half full way of looking at this event, and it's not always true in every circumstance, but it's true more often than not. It really doesn't matter very much. That's the glass half full view, and it's because it's true. It's an exhibition for a team in Michigan State's position. Unless something really surprising happens tomorrow, they were locked into a two seed. The only shot they had, and it would have been a long shot to get a one seed, was if they'd won this game, got into tomorrow, and Florida had happened to stumble in the SEC tournament because the other three number one seeds were on lock. And that didn't happen. So even if Michigan State had won today, they weren't getting a one seed. Florida's been very impressive in the SEC tournament. They're playing in that conference tournament final tomorrow. So, from an MSU perspective, eh, it doesn't really mean very much. This is always, I mean, I remember going back to your second favorite program, Iowa, the year they won it when Steve Alford was the coach.
Right.
And he made a big deal about it, meaning that Iowa was Big Ten champions. No, it doesn't. It's ridiculous. Nobody believes that. Not in this league. So it doesn't really mean a whole hell of a lot. Now, the glass half empty view is Michigan State wanted to win it.
Mm-hmm.
They have won more Big Ten tournament championships than anybody else. That will remain intact, by the way, no matter what happens tomorrow. Um, and they wanted to win another one. And for this team, I think they deserve to win another one. So it's disappointing. It's disappointing losing a game anytime it happens. I'm not about to, despite what I just said about it not really mattering, which is honestly how I feel about it. Maybe a better way of putting it is I think there's only upside in an event like this for a team in Michigan State's position. Not very much downside. Today is it's always disappointing to lose a game, especially, and I'm not going to say it was a flawlessly played game by any means, but that was a high level game. That was two
Yeah.
very good teams playing a pretty good brand of basketball both ways. I don't think there's any shame in losing to Wisconsin the way Wisconsin played. I think Wisconsin did a lot of good things. Um, we'll talk more about Tonje, but I'd have to go back and refresh my memory because it seems like it's been 5 years ago. But the only other guy that comes to mind who might have played that well against Michigan State in an individual game this season was the Haggerty kid at Memphis in Maui. That's about it. Nobody else has been in this realm as Tonje was today. So that was impressive on his part. It was impressive for Wisconsin. They got surprising contributions from a couple of guys,
Hmm.
Gilmore particularly,
Yep.
at both ends. But I do want to talk about those last two plays for a second, the last two Michigan State possessions. The first one came off a push, and it was, I believe they missed the second of two free throws, Wisconsin, I believe. Um, and that made it a 3-point game still at that stage. Michigan State gets the rebound, pushes, and then they get a kick out. They kick it back to Trey Holloman, who looked wide open as the day is long from the top of the key, because he was.
Yeah.
Carter Gilmore made a recovery that I suspect he didn't think he could make. I'll give him credit for one thing he did on that was not good fortune. He went with that attempted closeout, he went to the side of Trey rather than straight on. If
Right.
he goes straight on at Trey, he goes through him, and that's definitely a foul,
Right.
even if it comes after the release. Um, so a very good decision to go off to the side. Because he went off to the side, I think he was trying to avoid foul. This is my guess. I can never prove this. I think what he was trying to do is to avoid fouling, but still get some type of semi contest on
Yeah.
track. I don't think he probably thought he had a snowball's chance of hell of blocking that thing, but he did, and he did it cleanly. The issue you would have with it is to close out flying like that in that situation, very risky.
Hmm.
Very risky. Now he made the play, so you just tip your cap, right? Then the next one, Tonje, as you said, misses two free throws. Michigan State gets the rebound. They get the ball to Jeremy to push. Now, I've seen a little bit of criticism out there suggesting that either the outlet should have gone to somebody else or Jeremy should have passed to one of the other guys on the wing. I'm not going to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to that. In that situation, it is a scramble mode play. It was perfectly fine to me that Jeremy Fears tried to make that play. No problem with it. Tonje, it wasn't quite 50 feet. It was a little bit inside. It was probably more
40.
like 30, maybe 30, 35. It wasn't as far out as you might think. It wasn't as far out as Trey Holloman's shot, I'll tell you that.
No, it was like
It
just
was
at half court, but maybe it was a little
it was a
beyond.
little bit, it was maybe a good long step inside of that. Actually a makeable shot. I'm not saying he would have hit it, but a makeable shot if he gets it off. Given the situation, it's one you would take. Tonje reaches in and everybody goes up in arms because they think there's a foul that hasn't been called. Just like with Gilmore's play. Unbelievably risky, but he gets away with it. because he stripped the ball cleanly. It was a clean play. Now, the other element of risk besides what could have happened if the hand had been half a beat slower in getting in there is even if you make those two plays cleanly, there's always a pretty good sized risk it's going to get called.
Right.
So it really was a situation with both of them, in my opinion, where you just tip your hat to Wisconsin. Hey, you made the play, but very reckless, very reckless stuff. I would be in that situation. I would have, if I were Wisconsin, I probably would have been more comfortable with just letting Jeremy Fears rise up and fire that thing.
Oh, for sure. Because the worst thing
You
is you
know,
end up tied, and the chance that is so
right?
small. Yeah.
The risk was if you AB'd those, the risk of getting a foul called on that, trying to make that play, much higher than Jeremy's chances of draining that.
Yeah.
Um, but they made the plays, and I think that in situations like that, when the opposition goes out and makes the play, what else can you say about it?
Yeah.
They did it. MSU didn't make quite enough. It was disappointing to lose it, but I'm not. I'm not all that upset. Honest to God, I rarely am with Big Ten tournament losses. I'm just not.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a farcical event, and I don't. I know it's your. I don't mean for you.
Hey,
I
what a
just
waste of money
mean
you went there. Yeah,
I just
right.
mean in a general way. It's now some years are better than others. I will admit that. Some years, when you've got a number of good teams that appear to be relatively close to each other at the top of the league, it gives you one more opportunity to see them play each other. And there are years, I always go back to the 2012 game where MSU beat Ohio State in the championship, and that was a war.
Yeah.
But they had split the regular season and they had been two of three tri champions. So you could understand why that one was kind of ramped up. I think the one Michigan State lost in overtime in 2015 to Wisconsin was a tremendous game. The 2019 game where Michigan State beat Michigan, that was a big one. So there are these years where it does seem to matter, but for this team again, given their situation, they lapped the field in the Big Ten. So
Yeah.
there's no argument as to who the best team in the league is. Not a credible one at least. It's not affecting Michigan State's seeding. So and there's an argument to be made that it's not a bad thing for Michigan State to go through a game like this because quite honestly, they haven't been in many of them.
Right. Close games where, yeah, one possession
Yeah,
games. Yeah.
not many. I mean, their wins have been, Michigan State's margin of victory in the league has been unbelievably impressive. It was better than Purdue's last year. That and Purdue was supposedly a dominant team, right?
Yeah.
Michigan State was even better in
No,
that
Purdue
respect.
and Purdue lost the Big Ten tournament last year as well.
They did in the
Right.
semis to
And it
Wisconsin, right?
ended in, yeah, to
Ended
Wisconsin.
in the national title game.
Yeah.
Look, and we've seen just to dispose of these arguments you'll occasionally hear dummies make. There's no correlation between Big Ten tournament success and NCAA tournament success
Right.
historically. Are there years where, I mean, the year Michigan State won the national championship, they also won the Big Ten tournament. That's true. They've been to multiple Final Fours where they didn't win the Big Ten tournament.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really mean, and conversely, there are a lot of years a team wins the Big Ten tournament and doesn't do very much, right, Brad Underwood?
Iowa. Yeah.
Well,
Fran.
him
Yeah.
in particular, I like to mention because
Yes.
he
Right. Yeah.
talked about it. Iowa, yes, Iowa on a couple of occasions. Yeah. So it's it's a cool event. It's fine, but it's not worth. Let's put it this way: I was much more upset by all three of the regular season losses than I was with this one. That's what it doesn't mean, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but we could talk about the game in and of itself because I do think I'm saying all that stuff. Please don't take it to mean that I think Tom Izzo and his players didn't care. They absolutely wanted to win that game. That was something that used to be said about Izzo when they
Right.
weren't as successful as people thought they should be in this event for a while. It's largely disappeared now, but people used to kind of to try to claim, oh, they don't care. No, that's not true.
Sour grapes.
Me saying it doesn't matter doesn't mean they think it doesn't matter. I'm just saying from the perspective me looking at what their situation is and how much it really means, it doesn't translate to them not caring. They wanted to win that game. You could see it. I
Yeah.
mean, the way they could, both teams, very, very, very competitive in that game, I thought. It was a very physical game. They played hard. Mostly, I think both sides played pretty well. So it was, yeah, it was good. And boy, the Big Ten tournament needed today from a competitiveness perspective.
After yesterday, yeah.
Boy, did we have some bad games. We've had mostly laughers in this thing, which is kind of surprising when you think about how deep the Big Ten was with quality teams. But that's what we had until today, and both of these were, photo finishes. So um, good, I guess, for the Big Ten tournament to finally get some competitive, well played games.
Yeah.
Both well played both ways.
I'd only add to that, as we're looking here, Auburn lost in the semifinals yesterday in the SEC. I don't think anyone thinks differently of Auburn, going into the tournament. Michigan State's, obviously lost today. Looks like Houston might, they're at least losing as we're recording right now in the championship game. I don't think your opinion is going to change significantly over whatever the results are of these games, unless someone goes in and just like drops a stink bomb and loses by 25 or something like that. I don't think you're really going to think too much differently of a team, right? In
You're
general.
not. The only thing in this top group that I think probably has been affected is that by virtue of Florida getting to the SEC
Right.
championship game, I mean they got to play Tennessee, and I guess theoretically Tennessee maybe would have a case of jumping them for a one seed. I don't think so. I think Florida's pretty much put it on ice. That's my guess.
Yeah. It might be the 1-2, if you lose your two, if you win your one, maybe, I don't know I'm
Maybe
not,
they'll set the
they
dynamic
just,
up that way,
everything's
but
set up except we'll just flip these two teams or whatever if we have
I
to.
just I tend to think Florida's probably done enough even in losing. I'm gonna guess they still get the one, but we may not have to find out because right now they're playing about as well as anybody at the moment. One other quick thought on this from a Michigan State perspective. I did see some people out there this week, MSU fans, worried about what the situation would be if MSU did win this thing and what that would mean in terms of taking what would have been what if they won it, it would have been a 10 game winning streak into the NCAA tournament
Oh,
and
it's like
being
a
concerned.
superstitious thing, like
Yeah, being
trying to
concerned
can't change
about,
your underwear for two
well,
weeks or something.
partially superstitious, but to be fair, I think also the argument is, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing to take a loss where the coach can get back to butt chewing and you maybe learn something. And I do think there were some things that Michigan State learned in this game. You alluded to one of them I think was very important. We talk about strength in numbers and the effect of MSU's depth, and that's all true, 100% true. But I do think what they found out today, maybe in a way we haven't seen in any other game I can think of this year, is when you have Jackson Kohler and Carson Cooper both battling some foul trouble,
Yeah.
that's not a great equation for MSU. Uh, both those guys. I would particularly say Kohler's absence in the first half. And then we don't talk about lineups and all that kind of angle of things very often because I know enough to know my limitations. And Tom Izzo's got a better, and his assistants have a better feel for the pulse of this team than I ever would. And by the way, that also goes for anybody listening to this, unless they're on MSU staff, which I think is unlikely. That said, my 2 cents, I thought they waited a little long to get Jackson back in the second half. And there was a long stretch where he and a couple of other guys sat at the scorer's table. I saw Graham Couch make this
Yeah, he
point,
and Jaden, I think, yeah.
and there was no stoppage in play for probably I don't know a minute and a half. And so couple possessions each way, at least, and they didn't. They weren't able to get him in. Graham Couch's point was, well, that maybe is a situation if it comes up again, and not just with Jackson, but with anybody. Say you had Jace Richardson sitting over there. There are a couple of guys on this team of equals where you say, yeah, I really need that guy in the game. Or let's say you've got Trey or Jeremy at the point and they're going through a bad stretch and you just feel like we really got to get the other guy in.
Yeah.
And they sit at the scorer's table. Crouch's point was they maybe Izzo will approach it differently next time, take the time out. I have long been an advocate of that. Most people get up in arms about the timeout stuff because they think he should use them more liberally to stop opponent runs. That I don't care about as much. I care about exactly what Graham Couch was describing today. If I were going to argue for more liberal use of timeouts, it would be for that reason. When you are going through a stretch where you need to get somebody on the floor or off the floor, and there's just not a stoppage happening, I would advocate for sometimes going ahead and stopping it yourself. That said, it's a waste of, I just wasted all that breath I spent saying it because Tom Izzo, if his career has told you anything, it's that he wants to have the maximum available number of timeouts for the last 4 minutes,
Right.
period.
Yeah.
That he is going to move heaven and earth to make sure he's got the max. And he's not going to do it. Yeah, I kind of wish he would in some situations. Not all, doesn't come up often, but every once in a while. And today, I do think it's fair to say was probably one of them. And it might be a situation where, in retrospect, he'd look back at it and say, "Yeah, we could have used Jax out there for those couple of minutes. We didn't have him." But
Yep.
hindsight is 2020.
Yeah. It's easy to look back and make those assessments. So just, I guess, just a couple people to point out. I mean, I think, maybe just talk about Jeremy Fears. I don't think there's much more to say about Jace Richardson, except he just looks like he just, Jace Richardson plus the last few weeks, and he continues to be impressive. And unfortunately, he was limited by fouls trouble as well early. But 4 for 5 from three, 21 points, 5 of 10 from the field,
Yeah.
perfect for 7 for 7 from the line, 7 rebounds. I mean, you can't ask much more from a kid.
He was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I mean, boy, it's eliminated that talking point that hung on for a long time this season about Michigan State not having a go-to guy because that is out the window now.
Right.
They absolutely do. I think it's pretty clear. If you want to say that John Tonje is currently the best player in the Big Ten, I'm not going to argue with that. Not after a day like today. But there's nobody else in this league I would trade for Jace Richardson.
Yeah, I agree. And then
He's right, not the body of work over the course of the season, of course, but at this moment in time, the way they're playing going into the real tournament, yeah.
Jeremy Fears, 14 points, 5 of 8 from the field. He misses 1 3-point attempt, obviously. 4 for 4 from the line. He had 3 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 turnover. Played just 26 minutes. He's looking more and more comfortable, and definitely looks like he's again able to push the ball and just get things in the flow. And that last play where he kicked it, he drove all the way deep in the lane, kicked it
Yep.
back out of Trey. And if there's any criticism I'd have of that play is that Trey, I think, thought he had more time than he did because he took a lot longer to load up and shoot than he usually does. And that's, I think, just because he thought Gilmore was, a mile away.
Yep. I don't blame Trey for that. Watching it live, I was shocked.
I
Because it's not
could
that's
believe it.
not Cohen Carr either. That's the other thing. That's Carter Gilmore.
Yeah.
You don't think there's any, no way did I think he had a chance. As I said, unless someone's going to put him on a polygraph, we're never going to know. I would guess he didn't think he'd do that. But to his credit, he tried and he made the play. No, getting back to Jeremy, though, Jeremy Fears, if there was anything that came out of these 2 days that would be an upside kind of thing for Michigan State beyond the obvious, like Jace Richardson continuing to be great, all that stuff. I would say it's the play of Jeremy Fears. I think he was outstanding. Other than I think he was MSU's second best player in this tournament.
Sure.
Today he was fantastic. He spent a lot of time guarding Tonje, and nobody was having success with that guy. But Jeremy is. I do want to say this about both Jeremy and Trey because it's again there's been some online commentary in this game specific to Trey. People claiming that Trey's technical in the second half was some kind of tipping point. And I'm going to say this about he and Jeremy together. They both talk tons of shit.
Really?
Yeah, I mean you see it at the games. If you're at the, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are at the games live at Breslin. You've seen it. We've seen it. Those guys run their mouths. Absolutely. And every once in a great while, I don't, I guess Jeremy has been called as part of some double technicals. Trey obviously got teed up. First of all, anybody trying to make the case that that cost Michigan State the game, Jesus. Come on. First of all, there was a ton of time left. I
Yeah.
can cite 20 other plays that didn't go the right way. So come on with that stuff. Here's what's important. First of all, I trust this gets back to a Tom Izzo line he likes to use with media where he says, I'll don't coach my team, meaning he'll take care of what needs to be taken care of. This is one of those situations. Those guys and their demeanor on the court, Tom Izzo's going to take care of it. And I'm sure he let Trey have an earful about that. I don't
He
doubt
did.
it.
I watched him.
Okay, and that's great. That's
Yeah.
that's what should happen. But that's the relationship. I can tell you as an observer though, I have been waiting for what is it now? 13 years for Michigan State to have a guy who played that way. Who played with that kind of toughness, that kind of passion, and yeah, a willingness to talk. I can cite some other guys who used to do that stuff. Guys by the name of Draymond Green, somebody named Mateen Cleaves,
Hmm.
somebody named Scott Skiles, if I want to go way back. I love guys like that. And this team having two of them, just give me more. I have no problem with the way those guys play. If Tom Izzo's got a problem, he'll take care of it. I trust that. But I don't he's smart enough and I know this because I've seen how he's handled other guys who were similar. He's not going if you think that his MO is going to be you got to shut your mouth. No, he's not going to do that. What he's going to say, I suspect, is some version of you got to be smarter.
Yeah.
He's
Right.
he's not going to rein them in and try to make them somebody they're not because who they are is pretty damn good. Both of those guys. Now today, I would say Jeremy had a great game. I don't think Trey was at his best. But that's been the deal all year long with this team.
Yeah.
One
It seems
guy's
to.
up, one guy's a little down, but the guy that's up kind of takes care of it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's nothing saying in the NCAA tournament opener that Trey Holloman won't have a fantastic game. I'd be kind of surprised if he doesn't play well.
Well, we saw this during the season where he'd have games close out with Trey. Some games would close out with Jeremy, and it seemed like
Yep.
recently it's been more Trey, but today was Jeremy because he was definitely
Absolutely. He's
playing better.
playing
Right?
better. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty. It's quite a
Yeah.
luxury to have that you can say, well, let's go to my other point guard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think those last couple of possessions, Jaden was the guy who was sitting. Wasn't a great day for Jaden. It happens.
Uh,
Um, but they went with, that's been the thing that I find amusing whenever I'll see somebody crying about playing time and distribution of minutes. It's like there's never been a team in my lifetime at Michigan State where I thought that wasn't getting handled truly as a meritocracy and by the players, that the players themselves are determining who plays and who sits. Because that's how MSU has been doing it all year. If somebody's playing better than somebody else, they're going to adjust the minutes accordingly as they go. People crying about Xavier Booker. Xavier Booker did not have a good day today. No argument about that. The stretch that he played was not a very effective one for the team, and some of that was on him, not all of it.
yeah.
Um, does that mean they're going to sit him going forward? I'll bet it doesn't.
It hasn't been the way it's been going this year, so you wouldn't expect it
Now,
now.
they were also, it's worth noting that some of that stretch likely was being played because of the foul trouble MSU was in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So sometimes that happens.
Hmm. Well, I mean, you need that fourth player who with some size just because of the situation. So you can't just sit him and just say, "Well, come back in 3 games." You need that, um, and he needs it for his development too. So I know Izzo's not going to give up on him whether fans want him to or not. I think
No,
ultimately when he
nothing's
has a
going
good
to
game, you know, they're not going to want
nothing's
that.
going to change. I mean, look, I think he played 4 minutes against Oregon.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. You're really going to complain about that?
All right. Let's talk about the player to keep in the gutter brought to you by the Brothers Just Two Gutters. It is spring, it's warm here, and it's raining here, so it makes me think of gutters. So make sure that your gutters are functioning properly, whether it's your home, your business, whatever it might be, whether it's just a small section or large section, they can replace them, repair them, clean them out, put leaf guards on, whatever needs to be done. The Brothers Adjuster Gutters can take care of that for you if you're in the state of Michigan. Whether you're on the east side or the west side, Kurt or Greg can hook you up. 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. And you can get your estimate at our support page, of course, at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support. And the player that Michigan State need to keep in the gutter, which my autocorrect took me 7 tries to finally get it from Tone to Tonje, is John Tonje. He
Ooh.
was most undoubtedly not kept in the gutter. He was about as far away from the gutter as you could be. 8 for 15 from the field, 4 for 10 from the field, behind the arc, 12 for 14 from the line, 32 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, no steals, and of course the famous block at the end of the game. So we talked before the game that Michigan State usually does a good job keeping the best player down. Certainly not the case this game. And as you mentioned, pretty much everyone had a turn at him, and no one really could slow him down. They were really effective, better this game, I think, than last game. And whether that was a Wisconsin strategy or just the way Tanji was attacking, really getting around those screens and forcing either contact or if someone went under the screen, then he'd shoot over it.
Yeah. I don't think, as I say, the one kind of caveat I've got in my mind, although I don't know that he was the guy we would have identified, would have been the Haggerty kid at Memphis,
Mm-hmm.
in Maui, is the only other one I could think of who played a game at this level. And certainly when we identified them as the guy to worry about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hats off to Tanji, man. He played a great game, and he's really had. I mean, this is good news, I guess, for the people in Madison because he had a great year, but kind of under the radar a bit. He was very streaky in
Yeah.
terms of scoring. If you looked at his, I think this is the fifth time he's topped 30 this year, but he's had a bunch of single digit games too. And the way he closed the regular season was not good. Michigan State kind of locked him up. He didn't do much against Penn State in the season finale, but he's been really good in Indianapolis. And so hats off to him. I think that Wisconsin, you could argue, I would say two things. One, I think maybe they ran their stuff a little better. I think maybe the quality of their screening action was a little bit better. Michigan State was trying to go over the top and wasn't always successful, and Tanji took advantage of that in a few circumstances. But the thing I think they really did better than they did at Breslin is Michigan State, as we suspected, was extremely conscious of guarding the three.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that can make you susceptible to slip screen action. That didn't really happen much in this game, or back cuts. But what did happen is what you mentioned. Guys taking advantage of a defender being right up in them and then going past them and penetrating. And that's a big part of the reason why Tanji shot 14 free throws, is because he was able to read those situations correctly. He's got a good handle. We talked about it both times we previewed this team. He is a true three-level scorer. He can hit the mid-range, which he did a couple of times in this game. He can obviously hit the three. He was 4 for 10 in this game. And he can get all the way to the rim and finish and
Yeah.
draw contact in addition to all of that. So very difficult guy to cover. I think um, it's funny because again, I don't think this event really counts all that much, but I think if you polled people right now as opposed to 3 days ago as to who the Big Ten Player of the Year was, it would be a
No
different
question.
result,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because Tonje has really responded. Now, the key for Wisconsin is they gotta they gotta keep him firing at this level.
Yeah. They go as far as he goes, right?
More or less, I believe that. I think if he struggles, it's extremely difficult to imagine them winning high level games. They'd probably be able to get through a first round game. But after that, even if it's them playing like a 6 seed in the second round, that's a difficult game to win if you don't have John Tonje. He doesn't have to score 32, but he's got to play well.
Right.
And today he was great. Full stop. He was great.
All right. So that brings us to Who Cleans the Glass Best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. And spring, so you want to make sure those windows are nice and clean. Make sure you contact the Squeegee Squad if you're anywhere in the Grand Rapids area, and it's a very large area. Indeed, includes Kalamazoo. Get the professionals to take care of your windows because, let's be frank, you're not going to clean them yourself. So they'll clean the inside, the outside, the screens, windowsills, whatever needs to be done. They can take care of all that. They'll get up in the ladders so you don't have to. 15% off. You mentioned Final Four when you get your estimate. You can do that at our support page, of course, at the Final Four. It's on the schedule.com/support. And coming into this game, you had a 17-10 lead, and I think you had Kohler and Richardson, which was 7 each, so that gives you 14. I had Cooper, who had 10, and Carr, who had 4, 14, so a tie, so no one wins. And I have been mathematically eliminated from the Who Cleans the Glass best contest for the year. Maybe we'll just do an NCAA tournament one just for fun or something. But anyway,
Yeah.
pretty I think this was a good example. Just well, I guess we'll talk about the boards later to
Yeah.
keep the game.
Yeah.
But I was going to say a little bit disappointing, but that was in large part, as you mentioned before, just Kohler being on the bench with the foul trouble really affected you because it looked like Kohler had 3 rebounds in the first like 3 minutes. I turned to my wife and said, "Well, this is already over," and then he had to sit with the fouls and
Yep.
gave me a chance, although I didn't really care that much about it. I'd rather get a win than 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 win this contest. But
Well, I will take my victory and with immense pride. and the magic number, I guess, has finally been reached.
yes, it has. We
So
won't we won't go over the results of the beat Rod contest
no.
where I will actually will
Yeah,
I've
we haven't talked
tabulated.
about that.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to make you feel bad. Um,
I already know it's ridiculous. I'm
so
not
on
even
the
close.
so on the scale, so it's how far away you are from the champion, and I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I know the champions. We had a tie for first, where people were off by 50 points.
Okay.
The worst was 84, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a shout out to my son's friend. That was you.
Okay.
He put it together. He said in 5 minutes, so that's his excuse. And then you had 68, and I had 66, and
Okay.
so my son was actually tied for first. So we have to try and figure out if this is
Wow.
actually if he gets any prize money. I don't think it's probably so. So
Congratulations. And how far were they off? 50?
50, 50,
Okay.
which is which is it sounds like a
I
lot,
think
but
that's
it's
a
with
better
18 teams.
performance.
That's pretty hard.
I think that's a better performance for me than it was last
Well,
year. I
last year you were
think.
in dead last. Yeah. So
Okay, so I had to
you
be. Yeah.
you were on the bottom third for sure. But it was a better performance from you. We also had more entries, so I don't know if we'll just kind of
That's called progress.
it's something anyway. All right, so go to the 5 keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. I'm wearing my great Nudge Printing t-shirt. We have tons of Nudge Printing stuff at home. Huge selection of Michigan State apparel and all kinds of other apparel, and they are partners. We will having the Final Fours on the schedule, logo shirts and stuff available soon once Gabe gets back from vacation. So we'll start up a store, and then that'll be available to everybody. And I think in perpetuity. I'm not sure at this point, but we'll see how that goes. So anyway, head on over. You get 20% off. You mentioned or type in Final Four as one word at checkout. And that's again at nudgeprinting.com. Check out their selection. A ton of stuff, not only at Michigan State, but all sorts of other schools as well, including other Big Ten schools like Indiana and Iowa. Not Purdue yet, so my son's not going to buy any of their stuff. All right, so Five keys to the game. The first key to the game was energy, and this is one of the. I thought both teams came out with a pretty good energy. I don't think there was any advantage. I mean, it was certainly an extra day of play for Wisconsin, their third game in 3 days, but they didn't seem like they were tired. We mentioned too that they had a pretty easy game against UCLA, so that
Yeah.
probably contributed so that they weren't as stressed as they might have been if in a typical sort of quarterfinal game.
Credit to them because this is where you would start to imagine it would show up. But I do think when I want to look at this so I make sure I get this right. When you look at minute distribution, I mean, so Wisconsin has Klesmit back in the starting lineup now. He only played 18 minutes. And in fairness, due to foul
Yeah,
trouble,
he fouls all the
primarily,
time. Yeah,
Nolan Winter only played 12. So those two starters were really limited. Tonje played 34, Blackwell 29, Crowell 31. But Carter Gilmore 30 minutes off the bench.
yeah.
Let me know if you expected to see that. And
I
they were
did. There are
good
a lot
and
of
they
things
were
I didn't
good
expect from.
minutes.
Yeah, he
They were
from an
good
offensive
minutes.
standpoint, he's good.
He had 10 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, no turnovers, 3 blocks, and a steal. That's ridiculous.
He was the X factor for Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if you're going to win in events like this, it oftentimes will take that where it's great to have your star playing like a star, but on the flip side, Wisconsin did not get great game. Blackwell had 14, but it was kind of a harder 14. I didn't think he was great. He certainly wasn't as good as he was in East Lansing. Winter and Crowell were kind of limited. So they really needed somebody to step up and make some plays. And today, Carter Gilmore was that guy in 30 minutes. McGee played 24. Janicki played 15. And then they got 7 from Xavier Amos. So, really, a 9-man rotation, we'll say 8 solidly.
Hmm.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
And I think that, and you're also right, I think, to point out that one really nice advantage of that UCLA game yesterday was it gave them an opportunity to not have to push those guys.
Yeah.
And so that probably had a bit of a knock on effect today. Yeah, I didn't think there was any advantage for Michigan State in that regard. So I think you got to say it was a non factor. And, for Wisconsin, hey, the way Michigan State's been playing to only be -1 in the second half, that's a hell of a job.
Yeah. And so then looking at the second key of the game was boards. This is a spot we had hoped Michigan State would have a big advantage. I mean, they had some, I think just an overall rebounding advantage. They had a 37 to 33 edge, which is an offensive rebounding edge of 8 to 5. Second chance points, a little separation, an 11 to 3 edge there for Michigan State, but probably not enough that you'd expect. Michigan State offensive rebounding rate was only 23%. I mean, Wisconsin was 16, although they had that big one late, which helped, but not enough, probably extra possessions there in order to make up the difference, obviously, in this game.
Which big one later you're referring to? You're not
That
referring to the
one,
one with
that
foul
the
call.
one where it was a missed three by Tonje. I don't know if the game was tied or it was like one or something, and then the rebound came in. It was basically going right to Akins, but he didn't know. He was just blocking it. He was kind of guarding Blackwell, and when he turned around to try and grab it, he sort of ran into Blackwell and got called for the foul.
Yeah, that
Um,
was I don't know if they replayed that in the gym or not. Um I think those last two calls we spent some time talking about were absolutely the right calls. The one you're referring to, which is what I thought you were talking about, that was much more borderline. I'm not going to say it was totally a missed call because there was contact, but that's one that, in fact, uh, Bill Rafferty's line was, "That's a play on." So it was a little bit, I'm not going to say it cost him the game, but that one was a little bit, yeah. But you're right, it was a big moment nonetheless. Um, I think in totality, it's fair to say, looking back, that Michigan State did not get enough done on the offensive boards. If you're not going to shoot better than they did, and they only shot 41% from the floor,
right.
well, you probably need to do a little better than whatever it was, a 23, 24% rebounding rate.
Mhm.
That's not going to be good enough. Now,
That's a
how
Kohler
much,
not being on the floor is
yeah,
a large contributor to
that's
that as well,
that's what
right?
I was going to say.
Yeah.
When you don't have Jackson Kohler out there for long stretches, Cooper Cooper tried to do his thing, and he had, despite some foul
He got
trouble with him, he
two
had
off.
28 minutes.
Yeah, he had two of them like off missed free throws that
But I mean,
which was a problem.
Jackson only played 15 minutes
Yeah,
in this game.
yeah,
That's yeah, that if forget the non-calls or Trey Holloman getting whistled for a tee or Xavier Booker playing a few minutes, all that stuff, put that to the side. The single biggest factor, in my opinion, in this game was Jackson Kohler only being able to play 15 minutes. When you look at it, and it shows up in a lot of ways, but as much as anything, what we're talking about right now, that they were
yeah.
not more productive on the glass than they were.
Well,
It's a
and also,
shame because given how the turnovers went, the turnovers were 7 apiece. You
mhm.
would normally expect Wisconsin to have an edge there. They did not. So if Michigan State had done something a little closer to what we normally expect, boy, in a 3-point game, that could have been a big difference maker. But, would haves and could haves.
Yeah,
It didn't happen. And credit to Wisconsin for that. Wisconsin, we said, very good defensive rebounding team against an excellent offensive rebounding team in Michigan State.
yeah,
Which one was going to win out? Well, I would argue that Wisconsin didn't win the boards, but they made it close enough that it was effective for them.
yeah. And this also goes to the fact I think Jackson's got to be a little smarter about early in the game.
Sure.
I mean, he's too valuable to lose to fouls early, and so
Yep.
he's just got to be careful, and that's
That
part of the development, part of learning, right?
if you're looking for things that you can take away from this and hopefully turn into a positive in terms of learning experiences, that would be a big one. The big men they can't take cheap ones, and it really felt to me like Jackson's fouls. Sometimes you say, all right, a guy's got what looks like an easy look at the rim, and you go wipe him out, make him go earn it. Okay, you can live with that sometimes, right? Jackson's were kind of cheap, as I recall.
Hmm.
Like they didn't really produce anything positive for Michigan State. Those are the ones you got to avoid.
Yeah. So third key to the game was guarding the arc, and Michigan State is elite at guarding the arc this season, and they held Wisconsin for the large part down. I mean, Wisconsin only hit 31%. They did launch over half their field goal attempts were from deep. I mean, that's partly because some of the field goal attempts got wiped out because they were actually turned into foul shots. But they were 9 for
Yes.
29. I mean, if we mentioned Tonje 4 for 10 and Gilmore was 3 for 4 or something like that. And so without those two, they only hit like 3 of 19 or something. Um,
Gilmore was 2 for 3.
2 for 3. So that's 6 for
But yeah,
13.
but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, I
So they,
mean that's he's become a much better shooter. I don't want to say that's like, you know, Zapala going out and hitting 2 threes. It's not that bad. But he's just not a guy. You don't expect to see him necessarily even take three
right.
in a game. Never mind hit two of them.
And they were some deep ones too. He wasn't like
They
right on the
were, and they
line.
were
He was,
open. They were
yeah,
open. Those were
for a
shots that
reason. He's
Michigan.
just 4 feet behind the line.
Yeah, and it's Gilmore. It's not Tonje.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to live with it. But again, sometimes you get a guy like that to step up and make plays like that. That's a big positive. I thought in general, Michigan State did a pretty decent job guarding the three. This is, well, I mean, you look at what they did to UCLA yesterday, and you say by
Hmm.
comparison, it was night and day better.
Yeah.
Uh, UCLA was just one of those days. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
it
think
was,
both ways. Yeah.
yeah. But I do think Michigan State, look, the shots that Tonje got from out there, I think were ones that I'm prepared to say for the most part were pretty well earned.
Hmm.
There was one where Zapala was in ball screen coverage and he got switched and then didn't realize that he had been switched until it was
Right.
too late. There were one or two of them Wisconsin had where I thought Michigan State's ball screen coverage looked like they blew a tire. But for the most part, I thought MSU did a credible job here. They shoot like, I don't know, 34, 35% on the year at this point. That's even with them having gone through a big time slump late in the regular season. MSU holds them 31%. Can't really can't really get too upset about that. It wasn't quite as good a job as they did at Breslin, but it was certainly good enough that it gave MSU a chance to win. Wisconsin didn't win the game from three.
No, certainly not like the UCLA game the night before.
Right.
And quietly, maybe not quietly anymore, but Michigan State shot 37% from three.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're almost all. I think almost every game in the last 8 or 9, they've been plus 30% from three, if not knocking the door 40% a
At,
couple times. So
at
I mean,
this, yeah. And look, you can have a bad day shooting the ball at any time. That's the nature of 3-point shooting, right? It's subject to extreme variance. That's just how it is.
yep.
So that nothing in this says, well, Michigan State's golden and they're never going to have another game where they struggle from three in the NCAA tournament. It remains to be seen. But I think if you're looking at recent performance and where that suggests their confidence level should be, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Like they,
you like the looks of what Kohler has been recently, the last
yep.
the stretch. Fiddler as well. I mean, you feel like if he's going to launch one, you think there's a reasonable chance if it's like in the flow, like he had the one in transition yesterday. I don't know. They have
I
more
do I
options.
do think I do think this. If we talk about turning points in the game, I have a little different one maybe than most people might. There was a stretch later in the first half when Wisconsin took that lead because MSU had led. I haven't looked at how many minutes each team led in this game, but I will not be well, Wisconsin led for a lot of the second half. It's probably pretty close.
It was
But Michigan
1927 for Michigan State and 1852 for Wisconsin.
Okay, so there you go. Michigan
So
State did
yeah,
have a slight edge. Michigan State certainly weren't blowing Wisconsin out, but they were in control. They were in front for most of the first half,
yeah.
and then down the stretch, the last 4 or 5 minutes, that's what allowed Wisconsin to get out to that 4-point halftime lead. And I think some of that was a result of Michigan State exhibiting uncharacteristically poor shot selection.
Mm-hmm.
There was a three that Jaden took and it came all seemingly right in a row. Jaden forced a three. It was just a bad look. Carson Cooper took a wild shot from inside the paint, but it was a shot that he had no business taking.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of others I recall during that stretch that I did. Cohen Carr, it wasn't necessarily the same sequence, but Cohen Carr taking two threes. Eh, I just thought Michigan State was just a little bit more suspect at enough times in this game in terms of its shot selection that it cost them.
Yeah. So the fourth key of the game was getting into the paint. This is something that Michigan State did a pretty good job of. Certainly at the beginning of the game, points to the paint was 30 to 24 edge for Michigan State. So almost half their points came inside.
Yeah.
So I think they did a pretty good job attacking. There were times you mentioned that they were settling a little bit, but it didn't seem too bad.
And they got to the line for 24 free throw attempts. Now, Wisconsin got 28, so they had the edge there, but both teams got there much more than they did in the game of Breslin.
Right.
And I think in Michigan State's both teams' case, actually, it was a result of exactly that, being attack minded, not settling. Michigan State, as I mentioned, had a couple of stretches where I thought they settled on a few possessions, but for the most part, they were pretty intent. And look, we talked about what Wisconsin does, right? And you saw it in this game. Michigan State for the game, I think they were 17 for 40 on twos.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good enough.
No.
And it's not good enough, I don't feel, because Michigan State was just missing. Like sometimes you'll have games where, hey, guys are just blowing layups, right? I didn't think that was the case here.
Yeah.
I thought Wisconsin forced them into a lot of tough shots that they didn't hit enough of. It was
And the
good defense.
fifth and final key to the game was easy points. This is a transition points. Michigan State 8-0 edge in fast breaks. They got a little bit down the fast break, not a whole lot, obviously, which we wouldn't expect against Wisconsin.
Right.
19 at the line. The shooting almost 80% from the free throw line, so much better performance after yesterday's putrid display. But obviously not quite enough. to be a difference in the game.
Michigan State, we talked about this in the context of free throws and transition points. So when you put those two categories together, MSU did have a slight edge. But as we say, it wasn't enough to get them over the finish line with a win. Um, I thought that if there's another, that's the funny thing. You lose a game, and yet if I look back at it, there are some things that were positive to take away from this. I thought, as we talked about, Jeremy Fear's overall play was very strong. That was good. Jace Richardson continuing to be a star. That was
Yeah,
good. Michigan State's 3-point shooting continuing. That was good. But another positive was a couple of things they just haven't done very well lately, and that's earn free throw attempts and cash
right.
in on them. They didn't lose this game because of the free throw line. That wasn't a negative.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, and that's a positive they can take from this and hopefully bring that right into next week and keep on going as long as they can with it.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think my family and I we're going to go get a consolation steak shake at the Steak and Shake here. This is the Steak and Shake capital in Indianapolis. Um, Michigan State, of course, will be back after the brackets come out when we have an idea where Michigan State's playing and when they're playing. We won't know
Well,
their
we
time.
can say with some level of confidence that it's likely to be Cleveland in the first round, and it's likely to be the Friday Sunday turn.
Right. That's
That
our
seems
anticipation.
very, very likely.
Yeah.
I would
Uh,
also say it
Go
seems
ahead.
very likely they're probably, if I had to bet, I'm going to bet they're going to be in Auburn's region. And I say that um, mostly because of the rules that the tournament selection committee has having to do with where teams from the same conference can
Right.
be seated.
For the top seeds.
This is the problem with there being four SEC, is it? Yeah, four SEC teams in the top eight.
Yeah. Right. Because
It
they all
it
have to be in different regions, basically.
yeah, it kind of defaults. It's hard to imagine a scenario where Michigan State is not with Auburn. I mean, we'll see, but I would bet against it, or
Because it's
bet
either
against any other outcome.
because it's either them or Florida, right? They'd be other the one seed, I suppose,
Right.
right?
It's got to be exactly because there's
Yeah.
two SEC teams that are going to be on the two line. So they're going to automatically be paired, you would think, with Houston and with Duke. So
Yeah.
that means and honestly, as opposed to how people felt about this a week ago, I think Auburn's lost 3 of 4. So are they, and Florida is red hot. Is Auburn really a team you view as a super team? Not me. Yeah, I don't know that there's much difference at this stage.
Yeah, and I think it's just teams started to build their own momentum in the tournament as well. So like you
Absolutely.
might look like you're hot and then you just, throw a
And
clunker down when you start the tournament or vice versa. So
we've
I don't
talked
know.
about this before. I can remember so many 2019. Oh, MSU got jobbed. They got put in Duke's region, the overall number one. Well, what happened? They got jobbed in 2009 because they got put in Louisville's region, the overall number one. Look what happened.
Yeah.
It's at some point, if you're going to win in this thing, you're going to have to beat good teams. It's
Right.
that simple.
I mean, and the thing is, that's also 2 or 3 games down the road anyway. So it doesn't, you got to get through a lot of
Right.
good
You got to
teams
get
to that
there.
point anyway. So,
You got
and
to
they
get
do,
there, and
and
they've
they do
got to
too.
get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Right.
There's no 1990 UNLV in this thing. That much I'm
It's,
certain of.
it's fun talking about all these things, the matchups and potential second round matchups, et cetera, et cetera. But things just are total chaos anyway when you get to the tournament, as we all know. We all fall into it every year and talk about, what's going to happen, but we have no idea. Just like on this Big Ten tournament, I think I was probably wrong about every single outcome yesterday and then today even. So
Well, you
I
you
don't know.
wouldn't have picked two teams that were kind of careening down the
No.
stretch were Wisconsin and Michigan, and here we are.
Yeah, I know. Further reason why we need to go get some ice cream tonight to prepare ourselves for that game. So, all right. I guess we'll be back after we get the brackets at some point, whether it's tomorrow or the day after. We'll kind of see how things work out. So, until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green. All right. Thanks for joining,
All right.
everyone. I'm going to get us off the live feed here, or try to anyway. And should do that. There's got to be a better way for YouTube to do this than be this slow for everybody. All right, but there we go.
We're clear?
We are clear now.
Okay. So you're staying
Yes,
for
we
tomorrow.
are. For the time being, we are staying, although no one's too excited about tomorrow's game, but